Hey everyone, welcome and thanks so much for being a part of Let's Be Blunt with Montel, a show where we explore the intersection of cannabis and culture, shining a light on the issues, innovations, and individuals that are shaping this industry. I'm your host, Montel Williams, of course, and today we've got a truly special episode for you. We're headed to the beautiful islands of Hawaii to talk about medical cannabis, the fight to protect caregivers' rights, and the challenges of cooperative cannabis farming, which is crazy. Well, this is a farm that I actually visited myself. Our guest today is Mr. Jason Hanley, a U.S. Army veteran, biologist, and owner of Waialua Medical Cannabis Farm on Oahu. Jason is a tireless advocate fighting for patients' rights and a sustainable medical cannabis program in Hawaii. With over 2 decades of cannabis growing experience across multiple states, Jason is here to share his insights on the evolving legislative landscape and his work with the Oahu Cannabis Farm Alliance and the hurdles his cooperative farm has faced, including a controversial raid in 2023. Jason, my friend, welcome. Thanks so much for being a part of the show. It's so good to see you again. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
We love you, Montel. We're happy to be here, and I'm glad we're connected again. We had a great trip when you were here, and I don't know if a lot of people know that you're one of the first people to pull off a cannabis conference on military land at Tripler Hospital. And that was a really big deal to start cracking the ice and moving forward. So I'm excited. I'm excited.
Absolutely. And, I was there pre the raids of 2023. First off, you've got such a compelling military background in itself, 2 decades as a biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and over 22 years of cannabis growing experience. Let's go back to the beginning. Can you start by telling us a little bit about your background? What led you to create Waialua Medical Cannabis Farm, and where you grew up, where you're from? Let's go back to the beginning.
Yeah, I can run you from childhood on. I'm a born and raised Battle Creek, Michigan kid with grandparents from the Kellogg's world. They were all in the manufacturing Kellogg business, coming out of the Navy back in the day, and that was their jobs. And I was raised by a great people who took us fishing all the time and hanging out all the time. Great grandparents, And then my journey kind of took me with my parents, who were both in the military, in the Air Force, both retired Chief Master Sergeants. We ended up actually in Hawaii in the late 70s, stationed at Hickam Air Force Base, went to Hickam Elementary School. We just kept taking journeys. The military, you just journey, every 3 or 4 years, you're moving. I ended up on the East Coast, South Carolina, Myrtle Beach, Virginia, Langley. We were all over the place. And then I ended up in high school in Colorado Springs, Colorado at the Air Force Academy. That's kind of, a little bit of my drive and the military, what was going on. I never thought I'd end up in the military, to be honest with you. And, we just kind of kept moving. And, some things happened in Colorado Springs where a lot of us were just, not being really parented, and things were kind of happening weird. And then, I got in a little bit of trouble and ended up in the U.S. Army. My grandfather was a famous paratrooper out of Washington, Martino. And he said, let's just throw you in the Army and let's get you going and get you back in action, because I know who you are and what you're all about. And so I went in the 10th Mountain Infantry for 3 years, got my college money. And as soon as I put my 2 years, 9 months, early college out, we drove on to education. And that's, I went to Richard Stockton State College in New Jersey as a marine biology major, marine science major, got my bachelor's there. And by the way, that's where a lot of our growing started as well. So back in those days, it was very, very illegal. So a lot of us were doing indoor grows just to get the medicine, to relax, not just to get high, but really a lot of us just needed it to find a place of peace in sometimes this hectic world. So that's what we did. We started growing indoors and having fun with that and being as safe as we possibly could, and then my journey took me to San Diego. I was out in San Diego for a while out of college. One of my first jobs with the Navy Marine Mammal Project. So I was training bottlenose belugas, dolphins, everybody. We were doing a lot of swimmer detection, protecting submarines, all kinds of really neat stuff with animal husbandry behaviors, really fun stuff. ended up in San Diego, and that's Southern California. That's some of the most infamous and famous strains in the world come out of Southern California. We got the Bull Rider, we got the Big Bud, we got the Cat Piss. A lot of people were already growing in Southern California and trying to pave the way, pre-Prop 64 actually, and just trying to get legalization going and dispensaries going, and all the chaos that came with that. And so San Diego, and then San Diego to Fort Myers, Florida. So I ended up getting on with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as an invasive species biologist. I put in 20 years with them, but my first tour was on Jan Ding Darling National Wildlife Refuge. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty fun stuff. We did a lot of bird surveys, reptile surveys, fish surveys, a lot of good stuff. And even in Florida back in the, this would be early 90s to late 90s, there still wasn't anything going on with, cannabis legalization. It was still very, very, very illegal. I didn't do a lot of growing out there. I was more of a father, biologist, and husband. So I just kind of took a little breather and, just kind of drove on with life. And then from Florida, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service offered me an invasive species job back in Honolulu, Hawaii. And that's the round trip for me. Ended up back in Hawaii where my father was as a Veterans Administration. He was working down in Honolulu and trying to get me back over there. And here we are sitting on the same beach, Bellows Beach, with him and my child that we spent 30 years ago spending the same time on those beaches as me and my father. So a really interesting circle of life that can't be denied. Some really cool manifestation and energy going on there. And, that's kind of where it all started. And then from there, I was already a grower. I was already loved getting people medicine. And, when I moved to Hawaii in 2005, my fault. 2005, there was still a lot of sketchiness going on. There was a medical program that was brought in the year 2000, but that program sat under the sheriff's office in the Narcotics Enforcement Division. So you can see what kind of problems that caused with doctors trying to get people medicine cards, with people trying to grow. And those stories are listed over and over again with no.
And that first law that they passed allowed for homegrown, did it not?
That is correct. Yeah, everybody was allowed to grow 7 flowering plants and 3 veg plants. So yes, it was wide open. But unfortunately, with the history of Hawaii and the Ronald Reagan days of Operation Green Harvest, they really left a scar on this place. And so, law enforcement just couldn't get on the same page of understanding that it was a medicine and people needed help, and they needed help growing, and they didn't need to be harassed. And so, that direction is still kind of prevalent today, but we're pushing ahead, and so, that's where we started. And
so when the law first passed, and again, it allowed for homegrown, it also allowed for this idea of collective growing, correct? Where people who had the authority to grow for themselves could bring it to a central location, basically not lease time, but have space in a collective where they could have their products grown for them, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, really what it came down to was they made this, you had to have a 329 card, but they didn't make a limit for where you could have these 329 cards on any space or time. So everybody had to list a grow site, okay? And so if your grow site was, say, on the same site with 10 other people, there were no limits at all. They hadn't addressed that, didn't understand it. And the caregiver law was actually really, really written poor because it only allowed for one person to caregiver for one patient. So now you've got these struggles of like, okay, we're growing cannabis for these people, but actually they're supposed to be touching their own plants, and all this ubiquitous language that was built into the program that really made everything very frustrating and very hard. And then on top of that, the Narcotics Enforcement Division had all the addresses for where everybody was growing, and they used those pretty unprofessionally, I guess you would say, by coming in and doing targeted, inspections, not telling anybody their laws or rules about, search warrants and stuff like that. So it was pretty hectic, and even doctors were being antagonized by the Narcotics Enforcement Division. So it was a pretty bad thing back in those days. Yeah.
And cannabis, now before the law even went in place, cannabis, I can remember being in Hawaii years ago before the law was passed, and it was pretty readily available in lots of different places. As a matter of fact, you guys had some really good bud out there.
Yeah, and I would say, that's, a couple of things that probably a lot of people don't know about Hawaii is that, I mean, there were a lot of the Vietnam vets and military people came back to Hawaii in the '60s with really good cannabis weed and seeds, and surfers as well came over, and that was the whole push. And yes, there was local legacy growers all over the place, and even places like Puna on Big Island in the '70s were actively had commerce with cannabis and had stores, car dealerships, everything was going beautiful. And then, when a presidential shift with Ronald Reagan came in, and he really, his war on drugs was really how he looked at it. Cannabis was this bad thing, and that's where Operation Green Harvest started happening. And you had locals eradicating locals cannabis and really just shutting down the whole program. Yes, where I would say the top of the government really wasn't a big cannabis fans, but the locals here were born and raised on cannabis, and really took some good avenues in life to work and be productive. But as you know, the suppression in Hawaii and no jobs and all the stuff that came with everything, it forced a lot of chaos, a lot of young kids getting in trouble, a lot of kids even going to federal prison, because there was just nothing here for them after, high school. There was just no jobs. There was nothing. And so, a lot of
Sure.
stuff. Yeah.
Well, can you give us an overview of what cannabis landscape looks like now in Hawaii? What's happening now?
Yeah. I mean, that's an easy one. Yeah. So right now, we have been working with the lobbyists and the politicians, and there's really it's a really broken system, as everybody knows. And I know you just have Pop Brothers on, and they'll spell it out for you. It's super easy. Once the regulators and the politicians get involved, it's a really bad thing, and it's not very helpful at all. There's no free market here, and I'll go back and then forward. In 2016 or in 2015, the program was kicked over to the Department of Health, which was better. No longer in the Narcotics Enforcement Division. But in 2016, instead of coming up with any type of free market, they lotteried out 8 dispensary licenses to folks that had to have a $10,000 application fee and $1 million of assets in the bank. And so you can see this is where we are right now. It's this really frustration of a monopolized market. Legacy growers are just like, what do you mean we can't sell our cannabis? And these 8 people can, with 4 retail dispensaries each. So, moving forward, where we are right now is in the last, 2 or 3 years, they've been trying to push adult use recreational bill. Me and Oahu Cannabis Farm Alliance and many others have been fighting it, because we know what the adult use recreational bill did to so many different states. It doesn't lead to a free market. But what a lot of people do, including the ACLU, Marijuana Policy Project, they guise it as like this: we're freeing people from jail. And we all know too well that the data is there, and that's not really happening. That's not what's happening here with an adult use bill. This gets confused with legalization a lot. So they're saying, hey, we're passing a legalization bill. And I'm like, no, you're passing an adult use bill. Speeding forward, the bill has been dead now 3 years in a row. It hasn't made any gains. Even this year, it didn't even get a third hearing, which usually happens. It just didn't even make it off the House floor after the first 2, and they just dropped it. So right now, our recreational bill is dead. In 2023, I brought in a...
If the recreational bill is dead, are they still operating on the 2016 medical bill?
Yes, our medical bill is still here, but it's the same thing. It's dispensaries only, right? Anybody who's working outside of dispensaries, as you know our farm well, whether it's donation or stuff, they're not supporting anybody. And, and I think, and dispensaries alone, as well as I know, Montel, if you had a dispensary license or I had a dispensary license, we'd be fighting for the people, right? How do we get these legacy growers going? How do we change these heavy regulations of, they copied the Colorado model, right? Seed to sale, metrics, all the stuff that's getting everybody in trouble right now, over testing, or testing by the state, right? This doesn't need to be done. This is a USDA thing, not an FDA thing. So, I think what happened is there's no movement forward, even though the medical program is here. But we wrote a medical bill, myself and the Oahu Cannabis Farm Alliance, along with Senator Awa. That is a Hawaii Medical Cannabis Act of 2000, started in 24. And it's a redo of the whole medical program. It's a very a beautiful bill moving forward that allows for free market. It allows for taxation. It allows for minimum oversight, but honesty from businesses. It's kind of a recreation. And I'll be honest with you, it came from the state of Maine. It's the most amazing medical thing you've ever seen in your life, built grassroots up. That is just mind-boggling. Now Maine's having their problems with the rec market, right? Because the big boys came in and brought in rec. But the Maine medical bill is just, it's astounding to see how they developed it and how they made it and how it's all small business, local owners engaging their communities, engaging with law enforcement in their communities now, like it was never illegal, Montel. It is an amazing medical bill. Yes.
And so that's what you're proposing has not passed. Has been met with a lot of resistance.
I think what's happened is, we have a lot of, I'll use the word corruption out here, and who's really introducing the bills and how they get in. And you can imagine with 8 dispensary owners and the mega $1 million that are invested behind them, they have the big word at the table, right? And so our bill has gotten introduced twice, but it's never made it to a committee to be discussed. And so that's kind of where we are right now. So, yes.
And they're trying to block it. The other 8 are trying to block it.
Oh, no doubt about that. Yeah, they want rec to pass so they can, engage in the tourism from the recreational market from Hawaii. We see, 20 million tourists a year or something outstanding. It's crazy. So, yeah, that's being blocked, yes.
Well, we all heard about what took place with the big raid last year. Can you walk us through that and what happened and what you think the motive was behind this?
I better have a cigarette on that one. No, we're good. We're good.
Okay.
That was a lot of stress, Montel. And as you know, from our farm, we were operating for many, many years. We were very holistic and kind and compassionate. I paid taxes. We did a lot of things. And then one day, we'd always, there's many times where the Narcotics Enforcement Division sheriffs wanted to come on our farm and do inspections, right? But we were like, you're going to need a search warrant to do that because we've seen you on this farm before. We've seen the chaos that you have caused. They had been on our farm before, right, with guns and just doing silly stuff. You know what I mean? Stressful stuff, not silly stuff. To be a mid-50s man, to see that happening on a farm with people coming in guns and checking out tags and how many plants do you have and not even knowing what they're doing, that was already stressful. And then, October, I think it was the 25th, a Tuesday morning, in 2023 now. So we're almost 2 years into it. 10 people at my door in the morning came down the gate and said, hey, we're this, and this, Homeland Security. We're doing a raid. Please lock your dogs up, da, 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 da. At the same time, there were 60 other officers at my farm. So a total of 70 personnel on a medical cannabis cooperative farm raid. They notified me as soon as they walked through the door, there would be no arrests and they would not be holding me. We're just taking everything in your house that we possibly can that has data on it or is involved with cannabis. And that's what they continue to do. So in my house, they took every disk drive, every computer I had. I mean, it was amazing, and, but I had a bunch. I probably had about, $20,000 or $30,000 worth of seeds I've been collecting for years in the refrigerator. And I said to Homeland Security, I'm like, can you leave the seeds? Because those really mean a lot to me. And I'll be damned if he didn't leave the seeds. It was a really weird thing, Montel. And then, obviously they let me leave in my car. I went over to the farm and here's 60 people, Homeland Security, 1 DEA agent, and the rest of them were Narcotics Enforcement Division, a couple of NCIS people on the farm. Imagine that one. I don't know if that's a smuggling cannabis across waters, or they're just task forcing up, right, to do what they do and have fun with their tools. And then another, 20 or 30 HPD local people. They took everything on my farm. So any equipment that was involved in manufacturing, any cannabis products, everything. They left my farm empty. The only thing they couldn't take was greenhouses because they're in place. But yes, they took everything. A whole day it took them to get everything out of there. $100,000 in manufacturing equipment, $20,000 out of my safe. That was the only money I had. And they walked away. And that was that. I called the head of Homeland Security the next day. They were kind enough to leave the roster of every person that was on that site in my bathroom by accident. Can't figure that one out, but I actually know everybody that was in there. And I called the main guy at Homeland Security that was at my house, and I said, "Hey, what are you guys doing on a medical cannabis farm? I really don't understand this. You didn't arrest me. I have no discovery." He's like, "Mr. Hanley, I just have to tell you, your case is very unusual." And that's it. Haven't heard from him since. Yeah.
Wow. And they haven't charged you with anything since?
No charges. Nope.
Yeah. They just took all your stuff. They confiscated everything.
They confiscated, and I did put in a foreclosure or a confiscation document to try and get it back. I forget what it's called. And they told my lawyers that if I pushed that document forward to get my stuff back, they would press charges. So they pretty much told me to drop my "get your stuff back" piece of paper. So, and my lawyer said, you should drop it, even though in my heart, I was like, well, we're not doing anything wrong. Why can't we just push these guys? But I think my lawyers are like, once you get in the federal court system, it's pretty messy. And
yeah. You might, once you get in there, you may not get out. I mean, it just seems so crazy. There's so much paperwork and cooperation happening. Farms like yours still face the federal pressure. A lot of people don't know that. I think a lot of people just think that, this is something that's over with, done with, gone, and it's not. But I'm thinking about, the way you feel about your patients and the people that you work with. I mean, what happened to them? They basically lost all their product, right?
Yeah, they lost all their product at the time. Waialua over the last 8 years has had over 4,000 grow sites on our farm, total counted. When the Homeland Security raided us, we had 980 active, what we call leases or grow sites, where a person says, "Hey, I'm growing at Waialua on our farm." So they took over 980 people's worth of medicine. This is medicine that we've been building over for years. So if yourself, you need a high anxiety distillate pen, it's there for you every time. We've made it. You know what I mean? We've worked with that patient to make that medicine, and so they basically just wrapped it all up and said, "We're out of here." And yeah, it was something that I never thought would ever happen to me. I thought I would get maybe a cease and desist order from the state that says, "Hey, we just can't handle this. We don't like what you're doing." And there's been a lot that's happened since you've been there, Montel. I've had multiple inspections. I've worked with the task force team for the cannabis crew to have people on the farm to show them exactly what we're doing. I've had the Department of Taxation law enforcement out to show them exactly what we're doing. I wanted to open these doors, whether it meant me getting in trouble or not, so we can move ahead and not worry about these things, or you can tell me to stop and that's fine. You know what I mean? And so, I think we did our due diligence and we couldn't believe it. It was the most amazing thing ever.
Have you rebuilt? Have you regrown now everything? Because anybody, other people who've gone through this would have given up by now with something like this happening. But you've kept fighting. Have you regrown?
Yeah, Montel. I know your energy is like a lot of people in the industry that care about people, and I'm that same person. I had almost 1,000 people counting on me. And when people are counting on you for that medicine, it's not a smoker and toker thing, man. It's a life and death thing, And so for me, I felt like I hadn't done anything wrong. There was no cease and desist. There was nothing going on. So I went publicly on TV, KITV, and I told them we'll be opening these doors back up in 3 days. And that's what we did. We opened it up in 3 days. We started growing again and starting to do what we were doing, you know what I mean? And we don't understand it, you know what I mean? And it's still today.
Did they circle back and they come back to you and said cease and desist, or they haven't even done that?
Haven't even done that. Yep. Nothing. Yeah, there's nothing. And as a matter of fact, even the state who wrote all these cards and wrote all these grow site changes, as soon as we got raided the next day, they were already emailing people to take their cards off our site and not supporting us. So, it's just the whole dysfunctional thing of, who's in charge of a cannabis program, how to do it right. And if you don't have experience, you don't know what you're doing, you're going to run, you know what I mean? And even it's funny because even these rec bills, Montel, that have come through, it's the state legislator taking trips with our attorney general who is anti-cannabis. Come on. And they're trying to build these bills to move forward, and they do it. And it's a Massachusetts kind of cut and paste. It's really not that great. There's a lot of enforcement. And then as soon as the state tries to push these bills through, these rec bills, well, the attorney general's like, well, we can't support that bill, but we made recommendations. And so this whole system of like I'm like, oh my God, you guys. And then, you have half the community in Hawaii that's impoverished and has dealt with what they consider gateway drugs or irresponsible cannabis in their opinion. And so they just split everybody. And that's not what we're doing. We're trying to bring everybody together and show them this really medical version of this and what it's all about and healing and how it can even change your communities, and we're really excited.
And that's why you've been so heavily involved with the legislative efforts like the Hawaii Medical Cannabis Act. And again, that's just sitting dormant.
Yeah, that's sitting dormant right now. We've got a big push. We've been working with this T-shirt is deschedule.earth. These are the kind of the new sheriff in town. They've got a lot of data. They've got a lot of information. They got a lot of protocols on how to start working things responsibly and smart. You know what I mean? Instead of just all of us running around going, I can't believe this industry. We're trying to now, light brush fires under certain senators. We're trying to get, who's doing what, what's going on here, we're, reschedule versus deschedule, and for us, it's, those are just propaganda words. We're really talking about repealing cannabis off the bill that never should have been there before, and so we've been working with deschedule.earth and their clerk, and it's been a fun ride, and it's only been a few months, and there's a lot of good stuff going on. So we're hoping that, this really, brings us forward with this medical bill, and we can start moving into a free market here in Hawaii and really, bring back jobs and businesses, and we're not even talking about jobs. There's lots of tourist jobs here, but we're talking about businesses, local owned, and really, we're talking about, moving into, changing the whole food source here and farming and, going to like less than 50% off the island, staying here on the island, and this is all through cannabis, whether it's hempcrete, whether it's agriculture, there's just so many beautiful things that can happen, but you have to be smart about the way you approach these things, or you can burn bridges really quick and not get anywhere. And I kind of felt like that's what I was doing the last 2 or 3 years. I was lobbying hard, thought I was talking to the right people. And Montel, when I say nothing happened out of it, I mean, after spending money to lobby and thinking that's the way to do it and talk to people and be positive, it just never happened. It was a fruitless endeavor, I would say.
So, I mean, Jason, do you have anybody in the legislation that wants to try to solve this, or are they just throwing their hands up in the air and just saying, screw it?
Well, I think there's a lot of people in the legislation that do honestly want to solve it, but I think they're just being bombarded with this adult use thing by dispensaries. We think is the most powerful people that's happening right now. We really think the dispensaries and their ability to lobby and what they're doing, possibly, the politicians pandering to the dispensaries and maybe some money being handed, through, donations and stuff like that. So we think that's a lot of the problem. Another big thing, Montel, is just the law enforcement side of it. It's just, man, we still have people here talking about reefer madness. I mean, it's pretty insane. And it is a big deal because, if you can't get law enforcement on and you got your city prosecutor talking about how cannabis is stronger nowadays and it's ruining communities, and we've been trying to reach out to him and I'd say educate him, not trying to be arrogant, but that's not the case. And so this whole reefer madness style of splitting the environment is also causing a huge problem. And so I think back to your original question, I think there are politicians listening. They just need to fail and understand what can move forward. And I think that's, and that's really getting them in touch with a lot of different states and people from different states that have succeeded.
Well, now, I mean, Jason, you've seen I don't know what you want to call it, hesitancy or confusion at the federal level even now, but do you think that any movement on the federal level will impact what's going on the ground there in Hawaii?
I think that is really, in a lot of people's minds, the only way to address it, right, is through the federal level, because the states are taking such different avenues how to deal with all this. They're actually causing a lot of chaos between interstate and everything else. So I do think, the federal way is the way to go about it. It's not easy. Same thing. We've been working through deschedule.earth just to kind of track back what really happened with cannabis. How did Nixon get it on the schedule list? You know what I mean? Without, anybody really voting it in, you know what I mean? There was just nothing going on there, and so, there was a recent 12 or 13 page document by like 13 or 15 blue senators to deschedule, right? These things are happening, but then it goes into a reschedule process which gets kicked out, right? So there's just a lot of noise that I think is trying to trick us into deschedule versus reschedule. This needs to be appealed, and we all need to work together. I know you have like Redman on your podcast and stuff and these are the powerful people, Montel, yourself, Redman. These people, when we all start linking up together, which it's going to happen, because we all stand behind this plant, this is going to push us forward. And so I think there is a lot of good energy. There's the National Cannabis Craft Coalition that stands behind small farmers. There's a lot of energy going on, because I don't think the government really understands that, we're not a bunch of smokers and tokers. We're actually very, very intelligent people.
We're just like them, the ones who are smoking in all these congressional parties. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's because we do know what's going on.
Yeah, and we've got a lot more humility and compassion, because we care about people. That's what we've been fighting for forever. So if you can't do that, then we're going to help you do that. And that's where we're moving forward. You know what I mean? It's the same thing for Hawaii. 90% of the goods get shipped in here. It's the same old thing. There's so much suppression. So let's stop. Let's get down to 50% of the goods being shipped in here. Let's get homelessness out of the way. So many things that shouldn't be happening in Hawaii with the tourism alone, the millions of dollars made. But, back to the federal government, yes, that's the best way we can do this if we want to open this free market, is get this plant off the schedule list. Even descheduling is not going to help, man. We all know that. Even rescheduling is not going to help. That's a ploy.
Well, do you see, let's see if we can talk about the bright side of this. Do you see any people in the legislature there in Hawaii that are coming around to understand that they've kind of opened up a Pandora's box, trying to continually make this as hard as it is? You got anybody trying to help turn it around?
Yeah, we actually have a couple blue senators, Republicans, that helped me introduce the bill, right? Because they're kind of using some common sense, going, well, this makes sense. Let's treat it like medical, let's move forward like it's a medicinal plant, and let's take that drive. So there are people around. I think they just need to be educated, Montel. It's really what it's all about. When you get an earful of Colorado dispensaries, medical, recreational, when you get these earfuls of things and you're not really talking to the people on the ground, which is us, which is the local people, you know what I mean? Whether you're, they're just kind of taking that drive. And so there are a lot of people, and I do think this is the year for us that we can really sit down and start showing them what's going on, you know what I mean? Because that's what they really need to see, and the medical program, there's people now that come out here for our expos that are from Colorado. They're some of the biggest growers in the world out there. And they're like, if we would have stayed medical, this would be the most beautiful program in the world. You know what I mean? And, when we say medical, it's like your HIPAA rights are not, taken away from you. You're protected. In Maine right now, Montel, you can get a license medically through a doctor without state intervention. Your information sits with you and Montel Williams. That's it. The state doesn't know anything about it. They laminate it with a state laminate, so it shows some validity, and we move on. That's the free market. That's what we're talking about. A license in Maine right now is $2,500 to start a cultivation, to open your own dispensary at home on your kitchen counter if you want. So this is what we're talking about. This is the beauty of it all. We pay taxes. We record some numbers here and there. You don't need to test our medicine. We're not going to sell our medicine if it's untested, because nobody's going to want to come to us. We prove to our people that support us, we'll test the medicine for you guys. What are you looking for? Heavy metals, pesticides? No problem. We do this all day, And so really taking all that energy away from the state that they think they have to regulate, that they're never going to be able to regulate. And then, of course, going into an adult use program is just the messiest thing in the whole world.
And I'm sure that the black market there in Hawaii is really like booming now, right?
Well, it's always been here, Montel. You want to shut down Operation Green Harvest. You want to do things like that. Come on. This is one of the biggest container shipping islands in the world, man. We bring in 90% of the goods. How much cannabis do you think is coming here? And how many people do you think supported themselves selling cannabis to stay on this island their whole lives? So these are not criminals. These are beautiful people. These are legacy growers. These are people that love cannabis, And, not to mention Hawaii is, reggae alone for Hawaii is just instrumental in building cultures of people that care and love and kindness. And so those all go together. And once again, we're not talking about smokers and tokers. We're talking about compassion, moving in the right way, and really doing what's right for this island and for the states of the United States. You know what I mean? Let's move forward and really do this the right way and stop the massive black market that's just destroying everything.
And for all those people in Hawaii who would want to try to help you, or people around the country who want to try to help you, where would they go? How would they be able to, and what do you think you need from them?
I think my first stop is deschedule.earth. That's the shirt I'm wearing. The clerk there, Mike, is the man, and he is connecting people. I would say start there. Don't start with the Oahu Cannabis Farm Alliance. Don't start with Waialua. Go to deschedule.earth. They know what we're doing. They know what's going on. And they are bringing people together, not to mention he's a Baltimore boy. So,
There you go.
So these people are solid. They know their information well. They can repeat their information well. I'm getting ready to go to a town meeting on Thursday that's local, talking about the rec bill and cannabis. And we're armed, man. We've got the Nixon stuff. We've got the 13 senators that signed deschedule. We're armed, and we've got a medical bill on top of it, an 80-page Hawaii Medical Cannabis bill. We're armed. And so I think that's the most important thing for everybody around, is to get to a centralized place and start talking with each other and start having these Zoom calls like you're doing right now, Montel. These are super, super important. Massive.
And are more and more people in the community responding now, trying to help?
No doubt about it. I mean, we're only 2 months into it, Montel, and it's blowing up, because they need information, which I could not provide them, right? I have some information, but when you start going up the chain of, repealing cannabis and starting to understand what all these things mean, you need to have the ammunition. You need to have the data, or you're stuck and you don't know where to go. Deschedule.earth has given us the data, and it's beautiful, man. It's inspirational for me as well.
My friend, tell me, is there anything else you want to add?
We're just very thankful to be on Let's Be Blunt. I mean, let's be blunt about it. And a big shout out to the people you've had in there before, Pop Brothers and Redman. I'm a hip hop head my whole life. Redman, thank you for being there. Thank you for taking this lead. I always thought the hip hop community was going to be something that changes this world. So we're hoping. Yeah. So, and Montel, thank you.
We got to keep hoping, my friend. And again, if people want to reach out to you directly, where would they go?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at care_Waialua. That's the easiest way to DM me. We're also on the Oahu Cannabis Farm Alliance, but Waialua is the best place on Instagram, care_Waialua. You can DM me there. I'm fast and furious, and I'll get to you. That's the best place, no doubt about it.
For sure, my friend. Well, thank you so much for all the hard work that you're putting in, fighting the good fight and making sure that people have access to good, efficacious medication. That's what it's all about, my friend. And hopefully we'll be able to turn this around in the next year or two. I have this really weird sense of feeling that this administration is contrary to any beliefs about anything else they're doing. This may be an area they may choose to step up to the plate and say, what's the problem?
What's the problem?
You know what I mean? And just make it happen. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I got to thank you. I got to thank all of you guys for tuning in. Jason, you be well. Take care of the family viewers. Good luck to you, my friend. Come back. Give us an update of what's happening, okay?
I will.
We'd really like to know that. Share that with the country.
Yep.
And I look forward to coming up and chopping it up with you again at your farm, if I can, at the collective. And I will tell you, it was one of the better experiences that I had in the space for a long time.
I better chop it up real quick and say we've got the Oahu Pakalolo Festival coming up Memorial Day. If you want to come out, you can find that online, the Pakalolo Festival, 3-day event with Alex Marley and a bunch of beautiful people, and put you in a tent and hang out with the infamous Montel Williams.
There you go, my friend. All right. Well, thank you so much, sir. You take care of yourself. You stay well. And you keep tuning in to Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments. Military Makeover is so grateful for the support of Purple Heart Homes, a nonprofit organization that rebuilds and transforms the homes for our veterans.
Our heroes come home with sacrifices most of us can't imagine. As a veteran myself, I've been there and founded Purple Heart Homes to help.
When I tell the story of Purple Heart Homes, it's the freedom to not have to depend on somebody else to do the simple everyday things in life.
Visit phhusa.org/makeover to learn how you can help.